Court reporter.
Could you raise your right hand one more time? Do you solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case down here is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning. Now, I have a few more questions for you. So, I can turn your attention to the period of time you testified about yesterday when you're at Mr. O'Keefe is in the back of the ambulance. With respect to his clothing, what, if any, observations did you make in regard to that clothing?
He had, in terms of what he was wearing,
First, in terms of what he was wearing.
he was wearing jeans. He had on a dark colored light zip up jacket. And I noticed one sneaker.
Now, with regard to that clothing, what, if any, observations did you make in regard to the condition of that clothing?
It was soaked through.
As far as tears or holes or anything else with regard to that clothing, what, if any, observations did you make of that?
I didn't see any.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 18. May I approach the witness room?
Yes. Okay.
Now, first, Firefighter McLaughlin, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 18?
Do I
Do
recognize,
you recognize what it is?
what it is?
Yes.
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
The address of the call, 34 Fairview Road.
Now, with respect to this photograph, do you observe within it or where Mr. O'Keefe was on the ground when you first arrived?
From this angle, no, I don't.
And if you could, it was not on the photograph. Is it off to the left, the right, or where would it be in relation to this photograph?
To the left, I would say.
And about how far off frame do you believe it was?
I'm not sure. So my view of the call was, my reference point wasn't a house on either side. The patient was off the road. So my view of this call was the patient was on the side of the road. The only thing that I noted was a fire hydrant. So in relation to, I know it was to the left of a house, but I'm not sure exactly how far left it would be from this picture, from this angle.
So your memory is to the left of the house near a fire hydrant, is that correct?
Yes.
Take that down. I have no further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. McLaughlin.
Morning.
You responded to the call of an unresponsive male in snow at 34 Fairview. That was the address you were called, correct?
Correct.
The house you just looked at, that is in fact 34 Fairview, right?
Correct.
As Mr. O'Keefe was being transported by ambulance, you were instructed by firefighter Flamati to get information about the victim Karen Reed, correct?
He wasn't being transported by the ambulance at that time. He was on the stretcher. And Tony, who was at the head of the stretcher, asked me to get information from Miss Reed about the patient, but he wasn't being transported in the ambulance at that time.
Who's Tony?
Firefighter Flamati.
Got it. When you did, in fact, did you follow those directives?
I did.
When you finally approached Miss Reed in order to get that medical history as best you could, what did the scene look like? Who was with you or around you?
So they started to move the stretcher towards the ambulance. Miss Reed was sort of, I guess I would describe it as moving around the scene. So she was moving, kind of going in circles. So I was really just focused on her, trying to get her to converse with me and get those questions. So that I wasn't really noticing anything else at that point. I was more just trying to contact her, and she was moving around.
What were you wearing at the time?
I had my like winter fire jacket on.
What color is it?
It's yellow and red.
Bright yellow for safety purposes.
Yes.
When you began your actual questioning, once everybody sort of stood still, and you began your questioning of Miss Reed, you were standing in one spot. Miss Reed was standing to your right. Is that right?
Well, the questioning started, as I said, she was moving around the scene. So the questioning was ongoing as she was moving around to different locations. I don't know exactly how many of the questions I got out during the time that she was moving around. At one point, we did come to a stop. And at that point, she was to my right.
That's the point I want to focus your attention on, if I could. When you came to a stop, that's the point at which you recall the statement being made that you attribute to my client.
Yes.
Okay. And in that group, who was there? I want to make sure I understand this exactly.
So there was Miss Reed to my right. There was a civilian woman to my left. There was a police officer who was not directly across from me, but I would say maybe diagonal to me, closer to Miss Reed.
Your Honor, I'm holding a photograph. This is shown to the Commonwealth. May I approach?
Yes.
I'll show you Mr. McLaughlin a still photograph. I'm going to ask you to take a quick look at that photograph and look up after you've studied it for a second and tell me if you recognize people that are in that photograph.
I recognize people in it.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes. Is this an exhibit, or are you moving to introduce it?
I'm moving to introduce it. It has not been introduced as yet.
Okay. So go ahead and have the witness adopt it first.
Sure. Do you see the person closest to frame? Closest to the camera?
Yes.
In what appears to be a yellow and red jacket.
Yes.
Who's that?
That would be me.
Who's to your right?
It appears to be Miss Reed,
And to your left?
a civilian woman,
And across, as you said, sort of diagonal, closer to Miss Reed is,
a police officer.
do you know that officer's name, by the way?
I don't know his name.
Your Honor, with that, I would ask that this be marked as next in order.
Okay. Is there any objection?
No objection.
So we are going to remark these exhibits today because of the problems that I indicated at sidebar. How do you want to do this, Madam Reporter? I don't know where we start from. Tori, how many are in evidence? Folks, it's my responsibility to make sure the record is intact. And you've heard numbers 1, 3, 309, 247. We need to straighten this out to make sure it's appropriate for you. You know what, Madam Clerk, just mark, Madam Court Reporter, just mark it as the next exhibit number, whatever in the hundreds that is, and we'll take care of this today. I don't want to waste your time, folks, while we do this, but it's very important that we do it.
Exhibit 381.
All right. All right, so there was any objection to that from the Commonwealth?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin, this is the time or the scene that you told us about when you heard the statement that you've attributed to my client, correct?
Sorry, say that again?
Sure. This is a moment in time, it captures a moment in time when you're standing there. To your right is Karen Reed, which you've described. To your left is a civilian female, which you've described. And across from you is an officer, which you've also described.
Yes.
So this would be the time or close in time to the time that you heard the statement that you attribute to Ms. Reed, correct?
Yes.
The first time you ever made that official report, or an official report to law enforcement regarding that statement was January 30th, 2022, correct?
Well, yes and no. The statement was made in front of the police officer, so that would technically be the first time that statement was made to a police officer in my presence. And then, yes, I testified to it on January 30th, as you said.
You said it on January 30th. You weren't testifying under oath, correct?
Okay. Said it.
Okay.
Yes.
My question was really, and I appreciate you clarifying, my question was really the first time you actually told this statement to any law enforcement officer was on January 30th.
Yes.
Okay, we can take that down. That was when you met with Trooper Michael Proctor, correct?
Yes.
Obviously, that was very close in time to the event. It was the next day. Is that right?
Yes.
The events were close.
The 29th. Yeah. So it would be the next day.
Right, 29th, 30th.
Yeah.
Okay. The events were fresh in your mind at that time.
Yes.
You obviously knew about the importance of that interview. You knew that it dealt with a police officer who had passed.
I knew it was important to talk to the police about what I heard.
And you wanted to be accurate.
Yes.
You wanted to be as detailed as you possibly could.
Yes.
And you understand that memories, obviously, they get a little worse with time, not better with time, right?
Sure.
The closer in time you are to the event, the fresher your memory is going to be about the details of that event. You would agree with that, right?
Sure.
You told Trooper Proctor the day after the event on January 30th that the statement that you attribute to my client was actually made to the female, not to you in response to your questioning. That's what you told Trooper Proctor, correct?
I don't have those notes in front of me, so I don't know that I can tell you that that's correct, but the statement was made in response to my question. However, the Miss Reed was looking at the civilian woman as she said that.
Does it refresh your recollection that what
Don't read what you think refreshes a recollection. You can show or you cannot read it. Yes.
take a look at the highlighted portion of that report and look up when you're finished.
Okay.
May I?
Sure.
Your Honor, may I
Yes.
first? Does that refresh your recollection about what you told Trooper Proctor on January 30th?
Yes.
And you told Trooper Proctor,
Don't
quote,
let her,
in turn,
hold on. I'll see you inside.
may I, Your Honor?
Yes.
In fact, what you told Trooper Proctor was, quote, Karen then turned to her friend and stated, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. End quote. Correct?
Okay.
Is that yes?
Yes, if you're saying that's in quotation marks in the in that, then yes.
That's what's in the report.
Okay.
And I'm not, you don't have to agree with me. I'm asking yes or no questions, not okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in fact, what you told Trooper Proctor was that Karen Reed looked at the female to your left and said 4 times, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, correct?
Yes.
And have you since learned that the name or identity of the female that was standing to your left?
No.
You're aware that the female that was standing to your left reported the exact same statement?
No.
Are you aware that the female standing to your left reported that exact same statement as, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Did I hit him?
No, I'm not aware of that.
You then went back to the ambulance after you heard that statement that you believed you heard my client state.
Yes.
You opened the ambulance door, correct?
Yes.
That was the back door,
The side door.
the side door. And there were 2 firefighter paramedics in that ambulance at the time, correct?
I believe there were more than 2 at that time.
2 of them included firefighter Nuttall and firefighter Flamati.
Yes.
And at that point, you told them what you believed you had just heard.
So I went into the back of the ambulance. I said, this is his name. This is his date of birth. She says he doesn't have any medical history or allergies, doesn't take daily medications. And then I said, she's saying I hit him. And firefighter Nuttall motioned to his face and said something.
Objection, Your Honor.
Ask another question.
So the answer to my question is yes, you told in front of Flamati and Nuttall the phrase, I hit him.
Yes.
Did you write that in any report?
I don't write a report in this scenario of my job.
Let her finish the answer, please.
So there are 2 people that will write reports in my department on a call, one being the lead paramedic and the other being the officer who's on scene. So those are the people that write reports, and I was neither of those, so I did not write that in a report.
Okay.
That's correct.
So let me ask the question again. You didn't write it in any report?
No.
You didn't write it in any notes?
No.
You didn't document that statement in any way whatsoever, correct?
Other than my interview with Proctor and my subsequent testimony.
You didn't document that statement in any way yourself, did you?
No.
Since January 30th, in that conversation that we just talked about with Trooper Proctor, your statement has evolved. Is that right?
I don't know how to answer that.
You testified yesterday to something quite different
Not quite different.
than what you testified, I'm sorry, than what you stated to Trooper Proctor.
Respectfully, I think my testimony has been pretty consistent.
You testified to something yesterday quite different in context than what you told Trooper Proctor. Isn't that right?
I don't know that that's right.
Well, you told Trooper Proctor, Karen Reed looked at a female standing to your left, said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Right?
Yes.
Yesterday, you told these jurors that Karen Reed said, I hit him, and an officer said, you what? And she repeated, I hit him, and the officer immediately turned and went to find another sergeant. Is that right or no? Yes or no?
No, there was more to that testimony.
That's
I
not what
think.
you said yesterday?
I think I said more than that, than what you just repeated.
Is what I said consistent with what you said yesterday? There's a lot of things that you said, more of. I'm asking, is that the sum and substance of what you told these jurors yesterday?
Yes.
So you would agree that from that time till yesterday, your story has evolved. It's changed.
Would I agree with that?
No.
I don't know that I agree with that.
You think the story that you told Trooper Proctor is exactly the same?
I understand what you're saying. So I understand what you're saying.
So has your story evolved?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Ms. McLaughlin, who's Caitlin Albert?
I went to high school with somebody named Caitlin Albert.
Somebody named Caitlin Albert.
I went to high school with somebody named Caitlin Albert.
So do you know Caitlin Albert?
I do.
You're friends with Caitlin Albert?
Um, I would say more acquaintances, not close friends.
How do you describe an acquaintance?
I would say that we have mutual friends, so we might see each other occasionally because of mutual friends, but we don't have a one-on-one friendship or hang out regularly.
Who's her dad?
I don't know.
The objection system.
Do you know who her family is?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach her?
Yes. All right. Ms. McLaughlin, I'm going to let you step out for a few minutes, show them what you have, and let a court officer know when you're ready for me to come back out.
All rise for the court, please.
So we have four pieces of paper marked for identification that appear, you got these off of social media sites, Mr. Jackson?
That's correct.
Okay. When did you get these?
I couldn't tell you the exact date, but we've probably had them for between 6 months and a year.
All right. And Commonwealth, you've not seen these before?
No, Your Honor.
Right. So we'll talk about Rule 14 in a little bit, but we'll bring the witness in. You can ask her questions, Mr. Jackson, about her vacation that you mentioned, the drinking that you talked about, the relationship with Ms. Albert. I've forgotten the first name already, and
Caitlin.
Caitlin, and about the house. So you can ask her questions about that, and let's see, you can show her these exhibits or these marked for identification if you need to. You may have trouble actually getting those into evidence, but I'm going to let you find out. You can ask her to identify them, how long ago they were, things like that.
Thank you.
All right, could we bring in Ms. McLaughlin, please? Yes. And Commonwealth, you just saw these today. I'm sorry, I don't remember if I asked you that.
Yes, and yes.
And you were objecting that, you objected at sidebar that these come in at all?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, here's the fourth one, I'm sorry. Mr. Jackson, here's the last one. All right, so Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Jackson's going to be allowed to ask you questions outside the presence of the jury, and you're still under oath and you have to answer them truthfully, okay?
Okay.
Ms. McLaughlin, when, just briefly as a predicate, when you stepped out, I just want to make sure we're very clear. Did you have a conversation with anybody from the Commonwealth between the time you walked out of court and just now?
Just about if I needed a drink of water or to use the restroom.
Okay, but nothing about the substance of your testimony?
No.
Ms. McLaughlin, I asked you before we broke if you know who Caitlin Albert is.
Yes.
You said that you went to high school with somebody by that name, correct?
Yes.
You in fact know that person as a friend, correct?
I know her.
She's more than an acquaintance.
I would say she's an acquaintance. She's not a close friend.
She in a group of friends of yours?
We have mutual friends.
How long have you known her?
Probably since high school.
When you say, and I don't want to ask your age, I wouldn't do that. How many years, how long of a span of years have you known her?
Since high school, so maybe 10.
And you know her family, generally?
I don't.
You don't know anything about her family?
I don't know her family.
Had you ever been to her house?
Not that I recall ever being there.
Not that you recall, or you haven't? There's two different things.
I don't recall ever being there.
Okay, so you might have been there, you just don't recall.
I don't recall ever being there.
If I were to ask you if you have ever been to her house, yes or no, you cannot answer that because you don't know. You cannot recall, correct?
I would say, I would lean towards no. I have no recollection of ever being at her house.
Are you friends with her on social media?
Yes.
May I approach her on her?
Yes.
I'm just going to leave all four of these up here. I know what they look like. Can you do me a favor and take a look at the first document? What does that document appear to be?
It says Caitlin's friends.
What does it look like? That's a printout of.
I'm sorry.
What does that look like? It's a printout of. Does that look like it's from Facebook or one of the social media apps?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Some social media.
Okay. Under Caitlin's friends, do you see your handle, for lack of a better phrase?
I do.
Okay. Is that you?
Yes.
Okay. Can you look at the next photograph? Before we talk about that next photograph, which is, I should go in order for the record, Your Honor. The first one was H. Before we talk about I, which is the next photograph, how long have you been social media friends, quote, friends with Caitlin Albert?
I don't know.
More than 5 years?
Probably.
More than 8 years?
I don't know.
The second photograph, or the second document appears to be a photograph. It's I, is that right?
Yes,
Do you see yourself in that photograph?
I do.
You see Caitlin in that photograph?
I do.
When was that photograph taken?
I have no idea.
Where was that photograph taken?
I don't know.
You have no idea how long ago that was?
I don't.
What was the event that was depicted, or that is depicted in that photograph?
I don't know.
Is that local, or was that on a trip somewhere?
I don't know. Probably local. If it's a beach, I don't remember. I've never been away like to a beach on vacation with all of these people, so probably local.
When we say local, let's talk about local. I don't mean, we may have different definitions. Where would that be? What beach? I'm not as familiar with the location.
I'm not sure.
Maybe on the Cape?
Possibly.
Do you recognize some of the other folks in that photograph?
I do.
Matter of fact, there's a lot of people in that photograph, right?
There's a lot of people in it.
Did you take a trip with all those people at some point in the past?
Take a trip.
To the beach?
Did I go to the beach at some point with these people? Yes.
Okay. When did you go to the beach with all those folks?
I don't know. I don't know when this picture is from.
Have you
It
gone?
seems old to me, but
Well, you can see yourself. I mean,
yeah.
What was that? Did you say it seems old to you?
Yeah, to me.
Okay.
This isn't like a recent to me.
how old do you think that photograph is?
I don't know. It could be around high school. I'm not sure.
And I know Mr. Jackson didn't want to ask you how old you are. When did you get out of high school?
2014. I
Okay.
graduated.
So could that have been around 2014?
It could be.
So you've known Caitlin for at least that long.
Yeah.
And when I say travel, I mean travel outside of Canton. You've gone places with her, correct?
Yes.
You've posed for photographs with her,
Yes.
with other folks.
Yes.
It's like socializing and partying, correct?
Looks like socializing.
Maybe a small vacation.
I've never been on vacation with a big group of people like this.
Well, that doesn't look like what would you call that if that's not like a mini vacation?
A day at the beach.
A day at the beach. Okay, so maybe a day vacation.
Sure.
Okay, let's look at the next photograph. Jay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I do need to remind myself. That photograph looks a little older, correct?
They both look old to me. I don't know when they're from.
I'm going to ask you the same questions about that. These aren't trick questions. I don't want to waste your time. What's that from?
I don't remember specifically what or where this is.
Do you see yourself in that photograph?
I do.
Do you see Caitlin in that photograph?
I do.
You're all posing for the camera, correct?
Yes.
What's the location?
I don't know.
No idea.
I don't.
This is yet another socializing event with Caitlin that you can't recall.
I don't know where this is
Is that
exactly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your words. Go ahead.
I don't know where this is exactly.
So you've had so many socializing events with Caitlin and other folks that you can't pinpoint this one as opposed to any of the others that you've had.
No, I'm saying I can't. These photos are old. I don't know. I don't remember where these were or the circumstances around them. That's what I'm saying.
You see how you're dressed in that photo?
Yes.
You see how you see the other friends that are there with you?
Yeah.
How many people would you estimate are in that photo?
Do you want me to count how many people?
Give me it. I don't have a photo in front of me, so just give me it. Is it more than 5,
12
12 people?
ish.
Do you recognize those dozen people?
I do.
Did you go on a day trip with those dozen people?
Yeah, possibly.
When?
I don't know.
Where?
I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't remember.
How many times have you gone on day trips with those dozen people?
I don't know.
How about turning back to photograph I? How many times have you gone on day trips and socialized with those number of people? Which looks like probably double that, 20 or 25 people.
I don't know.
That's a big group of friends of yours that includes Caitlin Albert, right?
A big group of mutual friends.
So it's not just that she's a mutual friend, she's a friend. Isn't that right?
As I said before, I would consider myself more of an acquaintance. We have mutual friends. I wouldn't consider her a close friend, but yeah, I mean that would be my answer.
You basically grew up with her, went to high school with her.
I didn't grow up with her. I went to high school with her.
When I say grow up with her, I mean you grew up in the same town as her, right?
Grew up in the same town.
Went to the same high school as she did,
Yes.
socialized with the same friends as she did,
Yes.
went on day trips with her,
Yes.
and have all the same friend group, right?
I don't know that we have all the same friend group. These are people that we're both friends with.
But you don't consider her anything more than just an acquaintance.
I think I described it to you.
The answer to my question is you don't consider her to be anything more than an acquaintance.
I wouldn't consider her to be a close friend.
Now let's take a look at the last photograph. Describe what's in that photograph.
It's a picture of me. Caitlin is in it, and there's seems to be other people in it as well.
May I approach?
Yes.
Both of you can take it. Sorry, I just want to drop it on you. That's a close-up photograph of who?
Caitlin, and I'm also in it.
And you're doing what in the photograph as it relates to Caitlin?
It seems like I'm kind of kneeling down next to her.
Touching her?
Can I see that for just a minute, please? Thank you. I'm sorry, can you show me you? Okay, okay. Thank you.
So just for the record, may I approach one more time, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Take a look at that one more time. You're sort of just behind Caitlin in that photograph?
Yes.
Caitlin's the one drinking the beer?
Yes.
You got your right arm around her?
Yes.
You both appear to be wearing swimwear,
Yes.
bathing suits,
Yes.
and you're giving some sort of sign with your left hand?
No, I'm not.
Is that somebody else's hand that I saw? Maybe that's Caitlin's.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have the photograph in front of me. I don't have it committed to memory. Looks like that's a photograph that you and Caitlin posed for together, correct?
It seems like it's a close up of a bigger, like a picture. It seems to be zoomed in on a group of people.
Which was posted on social media.
Okay.
Is that right?
Are you telling me that?
I'm asking you that. Have you ever seen that posted on social media?
I don't recall seeing this picture, but if it was on social media, then okay.
How long ago was that picture taken?
I don't know.
Who took the picture?
I don't know.
Where were you when the photograph was taken?
Probably at a beach if we're wearing bathing suits.
Probably at a beach or at a beach?
Well, I can't see a beach in the picture. We're in bathing suits. It could be at a beach.
Right, do you recognize the bathing suit that you're wearing in the photograph?
No,
You literally don't even recognize your own outfit?
no,
So that doesn't help define where you were and when that photograph was taken?
no, sir.
Do any of these photographs remind you that you've been to Caitlin's house at some point in your friendship with her?
No,
Has Caitlin ever been to your house?
not to my recollection.
When was the last time you talked to Caitlin?
I don't remember exactly. It's probably been a few years.
When was the last time you went to an event, socializing event with Caitlin?
Again, I don't remember exactly.
Did you talk to Caitlin at any point at or on or around January 29th, 2022?
No,
When was the last time you had talked to Caitlin before January 29th, 2022?
I don't know.
Would it have been a day before, a week before, a month before?
No, I don't talk to her. Like I said, we're not like close friends, so it's like pretty infrequent that we would interact. So I don't know when the last time before that.
What about texting or Snapchatting or communicating in that way?
I don't remember.
Would it have been a week before the 29th?
I don't think so.
You don't think so, or you know so?
I don't think so.
What about after the 29th, after you responded to 34 Fairview? You ever have any communication with her?
Not that I can recall.
So is that something that you think you might remember if you responded to a house of her father where there's a police officer dead or dying on the yard, on the lawn, 30 feet from the front door? You might have had a conversation with Caitlin?
I've never had a conversation with Caitlin about that call or this case.
Did you ever contact any of your other friends about the fact that you responded to Caitlin's parents' house?
No,
Were you ever asked about this relationship that you had with Caitlin Albert, this friendship that you had with Caitlin Albert at or near the time of the 29th of January?
no,
Did you ever disclose to anybody that you had a relationship with Caitlin Albert at or around the time of this event?
no.
When you went to 34 Fairview, you knew that that was the Albert family home, correct?
No.
When did you learn that it was the Albert? You now know that.
I know that now.
When did you find that?
I don't know. I don't recall. It was some point after. But I don't know when.
Would it have been the next day?
No.
You and firefighter Flamati and firefighter Nuttall were all discussing this case pretty intently after this event, correct?
No.
It's not that often in the little town of Canton that a police officer is found dead or dying on another police officer's lawn. Wouldn't you agree with that?
We responded to a medical call. So the conversation after the fact was at the hospital, debriefing the call, going over what happened, what we use for equipment, what we need, and just like that was the extent of the conversation.
Would you agree that this case, given its notoriety, is discussed at the fire station almost daily?
I don't know when I'm not there, but it does get brought up.
And obviously the fact that the house belongs to, or belonged at the time, to the Albert family is part of that discussion.
I don't know. Like I said, it gets brought up, but I just avoid it. I don't engage in the conversations.
It was certainly enough of a subject matter that you learned, according to you, after the 29th, that house belonged to Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, parents of your friend Caitlin Albert, right?
Well, at that point, it was on the news consistently, so I don't know where that like information was introduced, but
But it was pretty early on after the 29th.
I don't recall when it was known that that was the case.
I mean, you didn't learn that that was the Albert family home last week.
No,
You've known it for going on 2.5 years.
I don't know exactly when I learned that that was the house.
I realize you don't know exactly, Mrs. McLaughlin. I'm not asking you the day you learned. I'm asking you, you've known this basically through the lifespan of this case.
At some point after I learned it.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out about how long after, a week after, a month after.
I'm not sure.
But it was more toward January 29th than it was yesterday, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
One other couple of brief questions. Do you know any of Caitlin's siblings?
No,
You don't know Brian Albert Jr.?
no,
Do you know of any of her extended family that might be a little closer in age to you, like Colin Albert?
no,
Have you ever met any of them?
not that I recall.
Not that you recall, or no?
I don't remember meeting any of them.
Your Honor, that's all I have right now.
All right, Mr. Lally, any questions?
Sure. Just a few, Your Honor. So, Ms. McLaughlin, you're not friends with Caitlin Albert, correct?
I'm sorry.
You're not friends with Caitlin Albert, is that correct?
I would say she's an acquaintance, not a close friend.
You were shown some photographs of you in a fairly large group with Caitlin Albert, correct?
Yes.
You don't know when those were, correct?
I don't know exactly.
You don't know where you were when those were taken, correct?
No, not exactly. They seem old.
And just to back up, you knew her in high school, but you weren't friends in high school, right?
I would categorize our relationship as always being just acquaintances. I knew her. We had some mutual friends, but we were never close friends. We don't have a one-on-one relationship.
And as far as high school versus post-high school, would you see her more so during high school, the high school years, or after you graduated?
Well, probably more in high school just because you're there every day. But then afterwards, yeah, it was only here and there. Like I said, like mutual friends. So maybe events for mutual friends, I might run into her.
And to be clear, and I think you made reference to it, but that last photograph that's marked as K, that seems to be a cropped or sort of zoomed in of a larger photo. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, as far as each of those photos you were shown, you're present in a photo with Caitlin Albert in a much larger group, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever hung out or socialized with Caitlin Albert outside of the setting of a large group?
No.
You've never been to her house before that date of January 29th that you know of, correct?
Correct.
She's never been to your house that you know of, correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as that first one, that's as far as social media is concerned, as far as a friends list, and without sort of doing it, I'm sort of putting that in air quotes. How many friends would you say you have on social media in total?
I don't know. Maybe over 500. I don't know.
And of those 500 people, how many of those 500 people would you consider actual friends?
Much less than that. Less than 10.
All right, why don't we wrap this up, Mr. Lally?
Just when it comes to that day that you responded, you're working with the fire department, you responded to a call on January 29th to a home, or as you say, to somewhere on the side of the road. Did you have any idea whose house that was adjacent to where the treatment was concerned with regard to your patient, Ms. Rose?
No.
I know.
Okay. All right. So there was an objection that this was in violation of Rule 14 to admit these exhibits, Mr. Lally. That's what you said, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I agree. So the exhibits don't come in, but based on this voir dire and the answers, I'm going to give you some leeway on exactly what you did. Okay. The relationship, the socialization and the extent of it, friends on social media, those areas. You didn't quite get everything that you mentioned at sidebar you thought you'd get. So that's not coming in.
So
If you,
stay within the parameters.
so why don't you come over here then, just because. Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin, did you say you had a water? Is there a water waiting for you out there that you need? Or
I'm okay.
Okay, thank you.
rise for the jury. This court is in session. Please be seated.
So jurors, from time to time, there are things that I need to discuss with the lawyers, as you saw. We try and do it as quickly as we can. It's in an effort to make sure that what you see and hear in this case is appropriate for you to see and hear. So sometimes we spend a little time now that will save us a lot of time later. So we do appreciate your patience.
Mayor, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin, thank you for your patience. When we last left off, I was asking you about your relationship with Caitlin Albert. You recall that?
Yes.
I want to ask you a few more questions about that. You and Caitlin Albert have known each other for how long?
Since high school.
Which is, give me a span of time.
So probably about 10 years.
You have traveled with Caitlin Albert and friends. When I say traveled, I don't mean to exotic locations. I mean day trips, etc.
Yes.
You have a group of mutual friends together, correct?
We have mutual friends. Correct.
Those mutual friends have gone on day trips with you and Caitlin Albert involved
Correct.
on more than one occasion, as a matter of fact.
Correct.
On many occasions, matter of fact.
I don't know.
More than 5?
I don't know.
More than 10?
I don't know.
You've seen photographs of you with Caitlin Albert on some of these day trips, correct?
Yes.
You've seen at least 3 of those photographs.
Yes.
You're friends with Caitlin Albert on social media.
Yes.
Other than the 3 photographs that you've seen, we just talked about, there have been other events that you've been at with Caitlin Albert that weren't necessarily photographed, or we don't have those photographs, correct?
Probably.
You know that Caitlin Albert is the same Caitlin Albert that's the daughter of Brian and Nicole Albert, as you sit here.
Yes. As I sit here today, yes.
And you know that Caitlin Albert also has siblings, Brian Albert Jr., correct?
As I sit here today, yes, I know that.
And you also know, as you sit here today, that 34 Fairview was, at the time of January 29th, 2022, the Albert home, correct?
I know that as of today.
You indicated, let me rephrase that. When you showed up at 34 Fairview that morning, did you recognize that address or recognize the home as being that of Caitlin Albert's?
No.
You have since learned that that was Caitlin Albert's home.
As I know that now.
And you gave your original statement to Trooper Proctor the next day.
Yes.
And from that day to this day, or let's take yesterday, from that day to yesterday, you learned that 34 Fairview was the Canton Albert family home, correct?
You're asking if I know from,
Between those 2 dates,
yes.
between the time you spoke with
Yes.
Trooper Proctor in this report till yesterday when you testified, you now know that that's the Albert home.
Yes.
And you also indicated that between that report that you gave to Trooper Proctor, that statement that you gave to Trooper Proctor, and yesterday's testimony, your statement has evolved. You've already admitted that, correct?
I don't think I agreed with you on that.
It's changed? It's different?
I've always testified to I feel as though my testimony has been consistent.
I appreciate how you might feel. I'm just interested in the actual facts. You didn't tell Trooper Proctor anything about this officer questioning my client. Correct?
Objection.
So I'm going to see counsel at sidebar because I think this morphed into a different.
You agree, Mr. McLaughlin, that the statement that you gave to Trooper Proctor is not the same as the statement that you gave to these jurors yesterday? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, just one moment.
Yes.
A couple of other questions. When you did make this statement to Trooper Proctor, your visit to Canton PD was coordinated by another officer to put you and Trooper Proctor together for the interview, correct?
I don't recall that.
You recall being contacted by a completely different officer to say, hey, Trooper Proctor wants to talk to you, come on into Canton PD, let's have an interview.
I don't remember exactly how the interview was set up.
So that was my next question. You may have just told me this. Do you have any recollection who set that interview up?
I don't.
His name Kevin Albert sound familiar?
No,
You know Kevin Albert?
no,
You know him to be a police officer at Canton PD?
no,
You know him to be the brother of Brian Albert?
Objection.
no.
The objection sustained.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Lally, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So Firefighter McLaughlin, you went to high school with Caitlin Allen, correct?
Yes.
And could you describe the nature of your relationship, if any, with Caitlin?
I would describe it as we're not close friends. I would say we're more acquaintances. We have mutual friends. I don't have a one-on-one relationship with her.
And you were asked some questions about social media, correct?
Yes.
And if you could, or if you could guesstimate about how many friends, and I'm sort of throwing air quotes in there, how many friends on social media would you have?
I don't know, probably 500.
And of those probably 500 friends on social media, how many of those are actual friends that you talk to, interact with beyond social media?
Much less than that.
Now, prior to, well, let me ask you this. As far as, would you say that you saw Caitlin Albert more so when you were in high school or more so since you have graduated from high school?
I would say probably more in high school because we were there every day. So
And about what year or so was it that you graduated from high school?
2014.
And as far as any sort of photographs that were referenced to you, have you seen those photographs?
Here
Yes.
today, I saw them.
Do you have any idea where or when those photographs were taken?
I don't remember.
And of those photographs, it's not just you and Caitlin Albert in a photograph. Is that correct?
Correct.
So a larger group of people. Is that correct?
Correct.
When you were asked about sort of these day trips, they were sort of trips specifically on a day to a beach, it looks like, correct?
Correct.
And to a beach with a larger group of people, is that correct?
Correct.
And with reference to Caitlin Albert specifically, have you ever socialized with her in any setting beyond a setting that contains a large group of people?
No.
Now, with respect to, you went to, when you say high school, you graduated from Canton High School, correct?
Correct.
And you grew up in Canton, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you know Caitlin Albert before you attended Canton High School?
No, that's probably when we first really interacted with high school.
And essentially, you live within the town I'm sorry, you work within the town that you grew up, correct?
Correct.
And is that abnormal from a civil service perspective?
No, from a civil service perspective, you're given more points for residency. So it's actually, I would say, preferred, or you're placed higher on the list if you have residency in that town.
So it's actually preferred and more common than uncommon as far as growing up in a town and then working in that same town in a civil service position like a firefighter.
Yes.
Now, during the course of the time that you've been on the Canton Fire Department, have you received calls to residencies or other places or even patients that you either knew or were familiar with?
Yes.
Would that be a reason for you to not go on a call?
No.
And you have an obligation, wouldn't you say, to respond to a call when a call is made and you're on duty in that station house, correct?
Yes.
The objection sustained. Ask the question differently.
As far as when you're on duty as a firefighter at a particular station house and you get a call, what, if any, choice do you have to respond to any particular call?
I don't have a choice. I just have to respond to the call.
And then prior to that date of January 29th, had you ever been over through socialization or otherwise Caitlin Albert's house?
Not that I ever remember.
Had she ever been over your house?
No.
And again, had you ever socialized with her outside of a large group of people?
No.
When you responded on that morning, just after 6 a.m., the house of 34 Fairview Road, did you know who lived there?
No.
During the time since January 29th of 2022, have you ever spoken to Caitlin Albert about what happened that morning in front of 34 Fairview Road?
No.
Now, you were asked some questions on cross-examination about knowing sort of Caitlin Albert's parents' names or siblings' names or things of that, correct?
Right.
And prior to January 29th, you didn't know any of those names, is that correct?
No.
You learned of them subsequently, is that correct?
Yes.
May we approach this briefly?
Okay.
Into this case, not something that you had any conversations with anybody about, correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
All right.
Your Honor, if I may, I have a
Okay.
brief follow-up.
Okay.
You indicated, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Lally just asked you about these 500 friends on social media. A couple of quick questions about that. Of those 500 friends on social media, how many of those have you taken day trips with?
I don't know.
How many of those have you gone to the beach with?
I don't know.
How many of those have you posed for photographs with?
I don't know.
How many of those have you posed for photographs in swimwear with?
I don't know.
How many of those have you been photographed with your arm around while that other friend is drinking a beer?
Sustained. Sustained.
Ms. McLaughlin, all of those things that I just mentioned, you have done with Ms. Caitlin Albert.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
That's all I have.
Okay. All right, Firefighter McLaughlin, you are all set. All right, jurors, we are getting ready to go for our view. So we're about to visit a place which you'll be hearing about some more. You've heard about, you've seen photographs of. And in court terminology, we call this a view. The purpose of the view is to help you better to understand the evidence, which you'll hear during the trial, and to help you appreciate the location and its surroundings. The view that you will take is a part of this case. The observations that you make while on the view may be used and considered in your deliberations in reaching a verdict. The place that we're going to go, you've seen photos of, you've heard, it's 34 Fairview Road. The lawyers and I will accompany you on the bus. The attorneys may point out to you the arrangement of the scene and items that they want you to pay special note of. But otherwise, they cannot discuss anything in this case in regard to this case, and they can't talk to you. All right, they'll be able to do an opening here, and they'll be able to point these things out. While you're on the view, it's very important that you can't take notes, and you certainly can't use your phones and take photographs. All right, it's really just for you to see. You cannot conduct any independent investigation while we're there or at any time during the trial, as you've been told. You're not to return to the scene or ask anyone else to do it for you until the case is over. So this is your opportunity to take a look when we go. What you are to do in the view may be best summarized in two very familiar words, which is stop and look. Okay. Your responsibility is to see the place, to observe it carefully, and to remember what you see. So during your trip to and from the place that we're going to view, you're not to discuss this case or anything about it among yourselves or with anyone, and you are not to permit anyone to talk with you about the case. You'll be under the supervision of our great court officers at all times, and you'll remain together until you return to court unless the court officers direct you otherwise. And just so that you know, because some of this came up during our jury selection process, spectators, if there are any, and all members of the press have been ordered to stay 100 yards away from you. All right, so you can go and you can look and take your time looking without worrying about any interference from anyone. All right, so with that, Mr. Clerk, could you swear in, please, the court
The
officer?
court officers, raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly swear you will take this jury upon the premises in question and there suffer them to view the same and any property, place, or thing bearing upon the issues on the trial, as they shall seem necessary? That you will not permit the parties to enter in a debate in front of the jury or a person to speak to them unless it be Adam Lally for the Commonwealth and Alan Jackson for the defendant. They to point out such places or things as they deem expedient for the determination of the issue, and that you will keep the jury together until they shall return into court, except the court shall otherwise order, so help you God. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Lally, do you want to do a short view opening?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So ladies and gentlemen, as Her Honor just described, we're about to go to a place. When we arrive there, and at any point in time when we're there, this is not a point where we can have any sort of conversation or back and forth. So all I'm going to be asking you to do is just take note of certain locations and certain items as you see them. And again, as with anything in this case, this is as you find them, as you observe them, okay? So first I'm going to ask you to sort of, when we arrive in a general area, as far as taking note of sort of street names when you're coming into and when you're exiting from this particular area. When we arrive at a specific location, I'm going to ask you to take note of certain things about the roadway. Okay, certainly any abutments to the roadway, any residences that you observe, the distances between the roadway, and any landmarks or any items that you observe on that property, specifically a driveway, specifically a front door, any other sort of items of interest within the front lawn area of that home. I'm also going to ask you to take note of the roadway itself and sort of the width of that roadway, whether or not you find any sort of lanes separating within that roadway, and then the individual width of some of those lanes as well. Lastly, there is also going to be a vehicle there as well. And I'm going to ask you to take note of certain things with respect to that vehicle, okay? With respect to the size of the vehicle, with respect to the height of the vehicle, with respect to anything that you observe specifically from the front, the side, the back, all of the exterior of that vehicle, and then also some of the interior of that vehicle. And specifically, I'm going to ask you to take note of sort of the center console in the front driver's compartment of that vehicle, and anything that you observe in that location as well. And that is all I'm asking you to do on this case, and I thank you again for your time and attention.
All right, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first time we've been able to speak to you directly, so I want to take the opportunity to introduce myself and thank you for your service and thank you for your time and commitment to this. I'm going to echo a lot of what Mr. Lally just said. There's nothing magical about this other than it gives you perspective. It's an opportunity to introduce you in three-dimensional form to stuff that you've been seeing in two-dimensional form. Photographs, some of the testimony, diagrams that you might see.
So I'm sorry, we're really pointed on what you can say.
What we're going to ask you to do is take special note of the relationships of physical items out at the scene. Much as Mr. Lally just indicated, there are going to be physical things out at the scene. You've heard about a flagpole, a fire hydrant, a house. We're going to ask you to take special note of where those are in relation to other things physically at the scene. That will hopefully, with the court's instruction, give you some assistance in putting together the testimony that you think is relevant, and the documents that you think are relevant. Again, to echo what Mr. Lally said, we're going to ask you to look at the roadway, the vehicle, the house, the physical items at the home, and the relationship between and among all of those things to each other. Hopefully, that will give you a very good understanding of what we're dealing with, especially with the exhibits. Thank you.
All right, so folks, we'll be all set. We'll see you at the bus in a little bit.
Just make sure your notebooks are closed.
You are muted. Goodbye.
Quiet, please. Step up to the witness stand, please. Face that clerk and the jury. You solemnly swear the evidence of the court and jury in the case now hearing to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I do. Thank you. You may take this seat.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Greg Woodbury, Woodbury.
And what do you do for work, sir?
Lieutenant paramedic on the Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire Department?
About 24 years now.
How long have you had the rank of lieutenant in the Canton Fire Department?
That's been 8 years now.
Now, prior to working with Canton Fire Department, what, if any, other work did you have within that same sort of field?
Prior to being on Canton Fire, I was an EMT paramedic in the North Shore area.
And if you could just, with regard to your working as a paramedic and a firefighter, specifically as far as being a paramedic, what, if any, sort of specialized training did you receive in regard to, or certifications did you receive in regard to being a paramedic?
So after I got my EMT, when I went to paramedic school, I went to Northeastern University. It was a 1-year full-time program.
And following, you successfully completed that program, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there any sort of continuing educational component or recertification component in regard to your paramedic certification?
Yeah, every 2 years, paramedics have to recertify. We're required to get so many hours of continuing education to recertify every 2 years.
If I could turn your attention to the date of January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022.
Mhm.
Were you working with the Canton Fire Department on that day?
Yes.
And what kind of shift were you working on that occasion, if you recall?
It was a 24-hour shift.
And 24-hour shift within the Canton Fire Department is what to what?
It's 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day.
Now, turning your attention to the 29th, at what point do you sort of get up and start to begin your day at the fire station?
So a normal day, sorry, was that my beginning of the shift you're talking about or the end of the shift?
Second day.
Okay, so the second part of the shift. Normally we get up at 6 for the officers, but I got up a little earlier then because we had the snowstorm coming in. So I had to make sure everything was shoveled. I think I got up about maybe 5, check the apron of the area in front of the station, and make sure the walkways were clear.
And when you got up to check that, what, if anything, did you?
It had been snowing. There was blizzard type conditions coming in. So it was a decent level of snowfall there. Let's see, maybe 2-3 inches on the ground at that time.
And as far as with reference to that, what, if anything, did you do to?
I think we can move quickly through this part of it.
Yeah.
The cleaning the apron.
I
Okay.
wasn't getting to that.
Okay.
Okay.
As far as that particular date or that shift, how are you assigned within the firehouse?
I was lieutenant on engine 4.
And with respect to that, at some point shortly after 6 a.m., did you receive a dispatch to a call?
Yes. Yeah, we're dispatched to a call for a person in the snow.
And did you respond to that call, sir?
Yes, I did.
And you were assigned to the engine, is that correct?
Correct.
Who, if anyone else, was assigned to the engine that day with you on that shift?
So we had Cade McLaughlin and Frank Walsh were my 2 engine crew.
And in addition to yourself and your engine, what, if
Yep.
any other sort of vehicles or apparatuses?
Ambulance 1 also responded with us. So that was Tony Flamati, Matt Kelly, and Tim Nuttall had also hopped on the ambulance. He was coming in for the shift in the morning, came in early to beat the storm.
And do you recall where the call was in regard to what the address was?
I don't remember the address offhand, but it was not that far away in the district.
And when you arrived in the engine, when you first arrived on scene, as you were arriving on scene, what, if anything, did you sort of see as upon your arrival?
So the police were already there. We were approaching the scene. I could see several people off to the side in the yard doing something. So we went to investigate that.
When you say off to the side, was that to your left, your right, or something?
So the way I was approaching the street, it was on the left-hand side.
And when you indicate you see some group of people, is that correct?
Yeah, there was a few people around. I don't remember exactly how many or what they were doing.
And when you start to make your way over there, what, if any, when you arrive on scene?
Yep.
What is sort of the first thing?
So we went to evaluate the patient. So, I believe someone had started CPR prior to us getting there. So we went to continue that.
When you say someone had started CPR prior to you?
I don't remember the particular individual that was doing it as we arrived.
My only question, sir, so it's someone outside of your department, correct?
Yeah.
And do you know if it was one of the police officers or someone else?
I don't remember.
Now, obviously, you're dispatched in response to an unresponsive male, correct?
Yes.
And at the time that you're arriving on scene, you say you see sort of a cluster of people. Were you able to see that unresponsive male at that point?
Not in the vehicle, not until I exited the vehicle.
And at some point, much later or subsequently, did you come to learn the identity of the unresponsive male or the patient that you were involved in?
Afterwards, they told me yes. At the time, I did not know.
And what did you learn his name to be subsequently?
I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous and blanking right now.
Was it Mr. John O'Keefe?
Yes, correct.
And when you first came over to where Mr. O'Keefe was on the ground, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
What kind of position was his body in when you first observed him?
He was lying supine on the ground, like on his back. He was parallel to the street, about 8 feet away from the snowbank.
And in reference to that, as far as the snow was concerned, what if any snow did you observe on or around where he was?
He was covered with snow, and there was snow around the area.
And so from a treatment of Mr. O'Keefe as a patient,
Yep.
what is sort of the first thing that you did or
We started CPR, or CCR, sorry, immediately. Someone went to go get a board to get him onto that so we can get him onto the stretcher and move him to the ambulance. And then someone else was trying to get the backstory, trying to figure out the scenario that we're dealing with.
if I could just stop you for a moment. So
Yep.
you mentioned CCR, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the difference between CCR versus CPR?
CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So that is when you're helping someone breathe. CCR is when we first get to a scene. They changed the protocols a little while ago, so we don't have to give respirations right away. We can just do compressions. It's a little more effective to get the blood flowing quickly.
Thank you. As far as your involvement in patient care, sort of what
Yep.
was that during that initial phase where Mr. O'Keefe was supine on the ground? What was your involvement in patient care at that point?
I was assisting with the CPR, making sure everyone else was doing their task. As a lieutenant, I kind of got to manage the other people and make sure everyone's on target for what they're supposed to be doing.
And during that initial time that you're outside in the area where Mr. O'Keefe is on the ground, what, if any, observations did you make as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe at that time?
Outside on the ground, he was covered in snow. So we're really not doing any sort of secondary survey initially. The primary concern is the primary survey, which is airway, breathing, circulation. He was not breathing. He had no pulse. So our primary concern is to get that going.
And at some point, are you able to get him from the ground to the back of the ambulance?
Yeah, we moved him onto a longboard, then moved him from the longboard onto the stretcher and brought the stretcher over the ambulance and loaded him in there.
You mentioned at some point upon your sort of initial arrival at the patient that different people were tasked with different things. Right?
Yes.
And someone was tasked with trying to get sort of what you termed a backstory. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why,
Yeah.
why is that important?
So when you have someone unconscious, unresponsive, you want to know when they were last well, the last breathing, last seen, trying to figure out why someone is on the ground. There are different reasons of why they could be there, trying to figure that out. Normally people don't lay down in the snow. So trying to evaluate the reason the person was unconscious.
And so you're able to get him on, Mr. O'Keefe, onto a stretcher into the back of the ambulance, correct?
Yes,
Fair to say that the lighting in the back of the ambulance is better than it was outside.
correct.
And when you're in the back of the ambulance, are you able to then do or participate in that secondary survey?
Yeah, we started doing a secondary survey after we started getting good compressions going. Someone was working on the intubation, and then one of the procedures is to strip off the clothes and evaluate the person.
And if you recall, how were the clothes removed?
I don't recall exactly which method they used. Typically, we cut them off, but I'm not sure if they did that or they just pulled them off.
And what, if anything, do you recall as to Mr. O'Keefe's clothing and sort of what he was wearing when he was found?
I really wasn't paying attention to it. The primary concern is trying to revive him.
So to that secondary survey, as far as once you're in the back of the ambulance, what, if anything, did you observe as far as injuries on Mr. O'Keefe at that?
He had a hematoma or a bruising. The right eye was very prominent. There was some scratches on the right forearm. Was most of the external injuries we noted.
And now, in addition, so as far as people on scene, there were a number of different firefighters from your
Yes.
department. And you mentioned that the police were on scene when you arrived. Is that correct?
Correct.
So beyond the police and fire, what if any other individuals did you observe at some point when you were on scene?
There was some other civilians there. I really wasn't paying attention to them.
Now, with reference to that backstory that you were talking about, at any point in time, either outside of the ambulance or inside of the ambulance, who, if anyone, was tasked by you or anyone else to try and obtain that backstory?
I think Katie McLaughlin was the one that obtained the backstory.
And if you know, was there any other conversation that you were present for between any of your other firefighters and any of those civilians?
That was primarily when she relayed to us the information that she had obtained. We were trying to figure out the scenario of why he was found unconscious, unresponsive.
Let me ask you this way. So as far as arrival at the patient when he's on the ground,
Yep.
who gets there first? You and the other individuals in the engine, or the firefighters in the ambulance?
We both respond from the same station at the same time. The engine's in the front, the ambulance usually in the rear. So I believe we pulled over, the ambulance pulled over at the same time as us. I believe C5 went as well, which is the captain. He was also responding with us.
Now, as far as the person that Firefighter McLaughlin spoke to, what, if anything, did you know about that person at that time?
At that time, I knew nothing. I knew that it was someone that had been with him. She relayed the information of what she had heard to us.
And the information that Firefighter McLaughlin, without reference to what it was, but the information that Firefighter McLaughlin was able to obtain, did she communicate that to you and the other firefighters in the ambulance?
Yes. Yeah, she came in the ambulance, told us what she had heard.
As far as the information that Firefighter McLaughlin provided, did that comport with what you were observing as far as injuries to Mr. O'Keefe?
Objection.
Sustained. You can lay a foundation if
Now, as far as, again, the injuries that you observed to Mr. O'Keefe in the back of the ambulance were what?
It was the bruising of the right eye and the scratches on the forearm.
And what, if anything, did Firefighter McLaughlin indicate to you had been told to her?
That someone said she had hit him, and he was last seen.
Objection. Move to strike.
sustained, that will be stricken.
May we approach on?
Okay.
Was doing the CCR, then to CPR. We're trying to resuscitate the person as best we can. We know with the hypothermic patient, it's very difficult. It's a longer treatment protocol than a typical cardiac arrest because we have to do the CPR for an extended period of time. We have to get the patient warmed up. So the clothing is just quickly removed versus examined or looked at. And the focus was on getting compressions done. Someone was trying to intubate, getting a line started. So that's what we're mainly focused on.
As far as treatment is concerned, what, if any, sort of interplay or intersection is there between a cardiac arrest and a hypothermic patient?
When someone's hypothermic and in a cardiac arrest, we can't declare them dead or passed on until they've been warmed up. A lot of times with hypothermic patients, they can appear to be dead when they're still actually alive. So there has been instances where people have woken up in morgues that were hypothermic when their body warmed up a little bit. So we have to be very cautious, very careful about, treating them as much as we can, as careful as we can. We can't shake them too much, can't move them too much. So it's getting the blood circulating and then starting ventilating after a few minutes.
Circling back to the CCR, the chest compression
Yep.
that you're talking about, what, if any, sort of, based on your training experience, what, if any, sort of protocols well, let me ask you this. Were you doing chest compressions throughout the entirety of this interaction with the patient?
No, chest compressions, most people do it for about 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, it's very tiring to do chest compressions, so we swap off every few minutes. So a different person will come in and do the compressions. They'll do it for a little while, go into a different task. Someone else will come in and do compressions.
Is that sort of the protocol that you followed in this instance? with
Yes.
regard to the stroke?
Yes, we were rotating her person doing compressions.
And the ambulance at some point leaves the scene and goes to a hospital, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you know what hospital, Mr.
Good Samaritan Medical Center.
If you could just wait till.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Questions.
Yeah, a Good Samaritan Medical Center.
And did you go along for that ambulance ride?
No, I did not.
And where did you go?
So as the lieutenant on the engine, I stay with the engine. I detailed my 2 other engine personnel to the ambulance. So they went with the 2 engine personnel, the 2 regular people on the ambulance, as well as an additional person. Timmy Nuttall was the extra person for that one.
And so you take the engine and go with it.
I went back to the station.
And at some point shortly after that, are you called back to the roadway of Fairview Road?
Yes,
And same general area of Fairview Road?
yes, same address.
And how is it that you get from the station back to Fairview?
So we had struck a box to cover the personnel that we had detailed. That means we send out a page looking for additional people to come in. We had Sam Pock come in. So he was my engine driver, and I was in the lieutenant seat. We responded back in engine 4.
And the ambulance that had been there on Fairview Road with you previously was at Good Samaritan? is that
Yes. Yeah. A call like that takes an extended period of time, even at the hospital, to assist them there. So we had to get an ambulance from Station 2.
correct? And if you know, who was on that ambulance from Station 2?
That was Jason Becker and Dan Whitley.
Now, with reference to this particular call, what, if anything, was this secondary dispatch with regard to?
So this call was for Section 12, which is someone in having a psychological issue.
And do you know who that Section 12 was in regard to?
Yeah, this was for Karen Reed.
And at some point, you go back to the scene along with the engine and the second ambulance from Station 2?
Yeah, so the engine got there first. The ambulance coming from another station, so it was a couple extra minutes before they got there.
And when you arrived, who, if anyone else, is sort of on scene on Fairview Road at that point?
The police were still on scene. They had never left. So initially it was me, Sam Pock, and the police. So I went up to try to get the backstory of why we're doing a Section 12 and what was going on.
And when you first arrived, without regard to what was said to you, but who, if anyone, do you speak with to sort of try to gain this information or backstory?
When I got onto the scene, I talked to the police that was there.
Who'd you talk to, sir? The police officer who
Police
was there?
officer, yes. Sorry.
And do you recall specifically who that police officer was?
I really did not pay attention to the individual officer.
And at some point, do you have a conversation, or what, if any, conversation do you have with the patient in this case, the defendant, Ms. Reed?
So it was when we identified Karen Reed as the patient, the ambulance arrived shortly after. We started talking to her and trying to get her into the ambulance to talk to her further.
And just to be clear for the records, when you say Ms. Reed, do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, she's right over there.
Does the record reflect identification of the defendant by the witness?
Yes.
Now, with respect to the defendant, Ms. Reed, where is she sort of when you first make contact with her on scene when you come back?
In the general vicinity of where the police cars are.
And what is sort of the purpose of this initial conversation that you're having with Ms. Reed?
For Section 12, that's when someone's made threats to them, harm themselves or others. So I just had to judge her mental ability at the time and if she was a threat to us and how much of a threat she was to herself. So just a quick evaluation, see how her behavior was.
And what, if any, observations did you make of her during your quick conversation?
She appeared very distraught, very upset. Initially just trying to explain the situation to her about going to the hospital with the Section 12, and she was resistant to that.
And so when you say she was resistant to that, what if anything, did she say or do to?
She did not want to go.
Hold on. You cannot talk over each other, and the objection's overruled.
Please go ahead, sir.
So what was the question again, please? Yeah.
So what if anything, when you say she was resistant, what if anything did she communicate to you, or observations did you make in regard to that?
She did not want to go to the hospital, and she didn't think she needed any assistance.
And what, if anything, are you sort of, you mentioned you were explaining sort of the process to her. What, if anything, are you saying in that explanation?
Well, once Section 12 gets written, it's written by the police. Once it's written, we are required to transport to the hospital. Section 12 means that they believe you're a threat to yourself or others. So you have to get evaluated at the hospital by the hospital staff there to see how mentally stable you are.
Now, at this time of this conversation, what, if anything, did you know as far as the relationship between Ms. Reed and the prior patient, Mr. O'Keefe?
I knew they had a relationship. I wasn't sure if they were married or engaged or what their status was, but I knew she was did have a strong relationship with him.
And in reference to Mr. O'Keefe, during your conversation with Ms. Reed, what, if anything, was she asking or saying in reference to Mr. O'Keefe?
She kept repeating, "Is he dead? Is he dead?" She seemed very concerned about that. We're trying to explain to her that we cannot declare him dead. He's being evaluated. He's being treated. They're trying to treat him the best they can.
And as far as when she's stating these things to you, is this, as far as the sort of tonality of her voice while she's saying these things to you, can you describe that?
She was very up and down. It was a repetitive conversation with her. She's obviously experiencing a lot of different emotions. So just her emotional state was all over the place.
And as far as this sort of second time that you're on scene, about how long period of time are we talking about?
That was about between 15 and 20 minutes.
And as far as your conversation with Ms. Reed, where did she go? Did you stay with her sort of the entire time that she was on scene that second time, or?
Because she was resistant, we were trying to get her to voluntarily go. If someone voluntarily goes, even with the section written, they're released a lot quicker. So we're trying to convince her to be willing to go with us versus being forced. If at some point we have to actually force her to go against her will, then it's going to be a much longer hospital stay. So our main goal with staying on the scene so long was to try to get her willingly to go. Just makes her experience much better.
And just to be clear, when you say we, who specifically are you?
It was me, Dan Whitley, Jason Becker were the ones talking to her in the back of the ambulance.
When you clear, sort of when you leave the scene, where is Ms. Reed at that point?
So the ambulance transported her to the Good Samaritan. We also detailed Sam Park as the driver.
So the gentleman who had driven, or the firefighter that had driven you in the engine to the scene that
Yep.
drives the ambulance away.
Yes,
Could
correct.
you say his name again, please?
Sam Park.
Sam what?
Sam Park.
Spell it, please. The
Uh,
last name.
P-O-C-H is the last name.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Okay. Ready?
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Woodbury, you and I have never met or spoken, correct?
No.
I know you had said you were nervous, so I'm going to try and make
Okay.
this fairly brief,
Thank you.
sir. I just have a couple of areas that I'd like to go
Okay.
through with. So to your interaction with Karen Reed and what you actually heard from her mouth.
Okay.
That's sort of where I want to concentrate, as opposed to anything that anybody else may have said to you about what they believe she might have said. Okay?
Okay.
And it seems to me that your main interaction with her was not when the initial call came in to respond to, a man who was unresponsive in the snow. It was after you went back to the station in the engine and then came back to the scene for the purposes of the section 12 that you described. Would that be fair to say?
Correct.
And when you came back to the scene for the section 12, it's also fair to say that the section 12 issue was your focus, correct?
Correct.
You had an order in hand, correct?
The police had it and they gave it to us when we got there.
Right. Okay. So you got an order in hand once you got there,
Correct.
which is what you expected to happen, correct?
Yes.
And your focus at that point is, okay, and I don't want to be too, flip, but we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Is that a fair characterization?
That is one way to put it.
And you wanted to do it the easy way.
Yes, correct.
And you wanted to persuade Karen Reed that she should want to do it the easy way, correct?
Yes.
And after some conversation back and forth where she was initially resistant, she eventually agreed, yes, I'll do, not to put words in your mouth or hers, but to the effect of, yes, we'll do this the easy way, correct?
Did get her to agree to transport.
And with regard to her state of mind, I believe you had testified that she appeared to be very distraught,
Yes, correct.
going through a lot of emotions,
Yes.
grief-stricken,
Oh, that's one of them. Yes.
hysterical at times,
Yes.
raising her voice at times,
Yes.
crying at times.
I didn't see any actual tears, but
That
Yeah,
type
of emotional display.
All right. And so in terms of the only commentary that you heard with regard to her feelings or questions regarding John O'Keefe, it was the statements that you heard repetitively over and over and over again. Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead?
That was some of the things she was saying. Yes.
Your Honor, may we approach sidebar briefly?
Okay. So I
Lieutenant Woodbury.
I think, Ms. Giannetti, I think you need the actual,
Yes. I was going to ask a couple of questions first and then grab it.
but it's right there for when you need it.
Lieutenant Woodbury, on your direct examination, you testified a bit, and I don't want to block a jury here, I'm sorry. You testified a bit about the injuries that you observed on John O'Keefe when you first arrived at the scene, correct?
Yes.
You testified about the swollen eye,
Yes.
and you also testified about the scratch marks that you saw on his forearm, correct?
Correct.
I'd like to show you, I'm going to approach in a minute to show you what has been marked M for identification. And when I hand it to you, please keep it to yourself and look at it, and then look up at me when you're done, okay? Having reviewed M for identification, do you recognize what that depicts?
Yes.
What does it depict?
That is Mr. O'Keefe's right arm.
All right. Does that photograph appear to be a fair and accurate representation of the scratch marks that you observed on January 29th of 2022, sir?
Yes.
I would offer that, Your Honor.
Okay. That will be our next exhibit. And again, we'll have to maybe renumber. Counsel, before you leave today, we have to figure out how to keep everything straight.
Understood. And with the court's permission, Your Honor, may I have that published on the screen for the jury?
Yes.
Now, on direct examination, Lieutenant, hang on. Let me just have a moment. Oh, good point. I'm going to try to get out of your way. With regard to the injuries that you described on direct examination, Lieutenant, I believe you would mainly concentrate.
I'm sorry. I need to, please take this down for me. I need to counsel this out. So jurors, I can assure you that by Monday, I mean, we're in really good shape. It's an organizational situation that I have to deal with. So we've been dealing with that. We appreciate your patience and we are in good shape. And Ms. Dianetti, if you need the exhibit, it's here.
Terrific. May I have it published again on the camera?
Yes.
Now, Lieutenant, with regard to the injuries that you observed, did you notice any lividity on the body when you were looking at John O'Keefe?
Being hypothermic, he was very pale overall. So the skin wasn't pinked up yet. So it's hard to really judge the rest of the skin that way until it's warmed up and much later into the scene.
You are familiar with the term
Yep.
lividity, though?
Yes.
Could you just explain that to the jury?
That's like bruising.
Bruce?
So it's like pooling of blood in lower sections. So for like a cardiac arrest patient, when they have lividity, it looks like bruising on the underside where all the blood has pooled. And we did not really notice that.
But it's not actually bruising from an injury, it's just the blood being
Settling down. It's the same thing, yes.
One at a time, please.
Yep, sorry. It appears like bruising, and bruising is basically pooling of blood under the skin. So this is lividity is just gravity fed pooling of blood under the skin. And it usually happens what is the section of the body that is lowest.
I see. Okay. Now, with regard to the scratches that you've testified about and that you now observe on Exhibit 382, I believe, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your testimony on direct examination was that you observed them in the forearm area, correct?
It was the right, like forearm to arm. I was trying to signal like right up here, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I guess that's my.
Yeah.
It wasn't just on the
Just,
floor.
not just, it was the arm area, mostly what I noticed was forearm, but there was some around there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it wasn't just below the
No, it
elbow?
wasn't up just below the elbow.
There was some above the
Yes.
elbow as well?
Yep.
That's consistent with Exhibit 382?
Correct.
I just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
No further questions.
Mr. Lally, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Lieutenant, thank you very much. So
Yeah,
you're all
thank
set. Our next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would call Mr. Daniel Whitley to the stand.
Clerk, and read your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and here is for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Daniel Whitley, Whitley.
And what do you do for us, sir?
I'm a paramedic firefighter with the Town of Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire?
I was hired in March of '06.
And prior to that work with the Canton Fire Department, did you work within that same field in any other capacity for any other company?
Yes, correct. I worked for American Medical Response out of Brockton as an EMT intermediate and a paramedic for 5 years.
And you're a certified paramedic, is that correct?
Correct.
And how long have you held that certification?
It was, I believe, November of 2006 that I got that certification.
And is there any sort of continuing educational component or recertification process that's involved with being a certified paramedic?
Yes, we recertify every 2 years. We're required to hold basic life support card, which is just generally CPR, and advanced cardiac life support, which is ACLS. It's more dealing with EKGs and how to run resuscitations, cardiac arrests, things of that nature.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th into January 29th of 2022, were you working with the Canton Fire Department on those dates?
Yes,
What kind of shift were you working in?
24-hour shift, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m.
And where were you assigned on that particular date?
The Ponkbog Station, Station 2.
The Ponkapog Station, where is that located within Canton?
The north side of town on Sassamon Street.
And how were you assigned to a specific duty or a specific?
Yes, I was assigned to Ambulance 2 with Jason Becker. As I was a field training officer at that point, and he was just finishing up his field training after he recently became certified as a paramedic.
And now, at some point shortly after 6 a.m., were you aware of a call or dispatch in regard to Station House 1?
Yes, we had just returned from a previous call about 5 a.m. and heard the tones go off. Actually, we were in the day room, which is where it's the living room of a fire station. And we heard the tones go off. We heard the police going to Fairview Road. And we just kind of sat and were wondering what was going on there.
Now, you yourself, you and firefighter Becker, were you dispatched to a call as well, approximately 6:41 or 6:42 a.m.?
Yes.
And at the time that you received that dispatch, what, if anything, were you aware of with regard to the prior call that the other ambulance went?
So when the tones go off between the two stations, we're able to hear what the dispatch complaint is, what they're going for, and it came in as, I believe, CPR in progress in the snow or something to that regard. So we knew that it was a fairly serious call that Station 1 had gone to.
Now, when you received your dispatch at approximately 6:42 a.m. or so, what was that call in regard to, and where did you respond?
We were dispatched for a Section 12.
And as far as your assignments within the ambulance between yourself and firefighter Becker, with regard to this call, who was doing what?
I was driving. He's what we call the tech, the lead paramedic on the case. That's just generally how we operate.
And from your response, or you're driving from Station 2 to Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you observe or experience en route in between the two?
At that point, it was snowing pretty heavily. We were coming down Chapman Street, getting ready to take the right onto Fairview. We nearly slid off the road, making the turn onto Fairview. It was snowing that heavily, and I don't believe the roads had been really plowed or treated or anything like that for us to. So it was pretty slippery.
Now, in addition to ambulance number 2 that you and firefighter Becker were in, what, if any, other sort of vehicles or apparatus was dispatched to this call as well?
There was engine 3, which is the District 1 engine, and at least 2 police cruisers. And then another gray SUV kind of further down from where we parked.
Now, when you arrive in this area on Fairview Road, what, if anything, do you sort of observe as far as who's there when you arrive?
When I got out, my Lieutenant Woodbury and Sam Park were there.
And they were on the engine, is that correct?
They were on the engine, correct?
Now, beyond sort of the personnel from your department, you mentioned that there were some police officers there as well?
Yes, Melanie and Sarah, and then 2 other females, at least 2 other females.
And the other 2 females, where were they when you first sort of get out of the ambulance?
A few yards ahead of us, a few dozen yards ahead of us, I'd say.
And were there any other vehicles beyond sort of first responders that you observed on?
Just that other gray SUV.
And so I guess my question is, where were the 2 females that you observed in relation to the gray SUV?
Near it, maybe in front of, maybe one was inside. There were 3 females there.
And at some point while you're on scene, you learned the identity of your patient, correct?
Yes,
And what was the name of the patient?
Karen Reed.
And you had some conversation with Karen Reed that day, is that correct?
Yes,
And do you see Karen Reed in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just describe as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's seated right at that table right there.
I'm sorry, if you could just point as to where she is.
Right here.
No, it's just that's record reflect identification.
Okay.
Now, when you first sort of arrive on scene, who, if anyone, is the first person that you talk to?
Lieutenant Woodbury and Sam Park.
And following that conversation, who, if anyone, you speak to?
Probably briefly Lieutenant Mulaney, but more, Officer Mulaney and Officer Sarah.
Now, following your conversation, well, let me ask you this sort of in general terms. When you respond to a call for Section 12, what is sort of the protocol that you go through in regard to that?
Whether it's a Section 12 or any call, basically, the lead tech generally takes over immediate patient care, goes over, assesses. Usually the partner will go over and try and find out background details, try and find not only, well, especially for a Section 12, you want to get, the tech will get, which is Jason's role, the patient story, and then I'll get everyone else's story.
And at some point, you have a conversation with Ms. Reed as well.
Oh, yes.
And where is that in relation to vehicles on scene? So what is that initial conversation?
The initial conversation, she was very upset. She kept saying, so we had a Section 12 written, and that was to take her to the hospital because she made threats against her life, saying, I don't want to live anymore. If my husband dies, I don't want to be alive anymore. And myself and Jason and Lieutenant Woodbury were kind of like, well, that's seemingly more in the lines of normal grieving process after something traumatic happens to a loved one, whether they're going to die or not. We kind of didn't feel like it kind of led to that level of a Section 12 to have her transported to the hospital. So at that point, I exited the ambulance and I went to speak with Officer Saraf, and I said, this kind of doesn't. If we want her to be at the hospital, get a full eval, we're going to need more than just. If my husband dies, I want to die, because that seems just like normal grieving things to say. And so I went back to the ambulance. He went, I don't know where he went. I don't know whether it was cruiser or what, but he came back, notified me that her.
Sustained.
And from that conversation, did you receive more information or more clarity as to statements that Ms. Reed had made?
Yes, Officer Saraf had said that.
Objection.
So not what he said, sir. So
We
You
were
are
informed
unmuted.
that.
Objection. I'm not sure.
So you can't testify to what somebody else told you. You can when there's no objection regarding what Ms. Reed told you,
Okay.
but you can't testify what anybody else told you.
Okay.
So when I say sustain, that means you have to stop. And-
Okay.
And the lawyer will ask another question.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Firefighter Whaley, at some point, specific to your conversations with the defendant, Ms. You described sort of her demeanor, any observations you made in relation to that as you were speaking.
Yes, she was very upset. She kept asking if there was any chance. She kept asking us if we knew if the person ambulance 1 had transported was alive or dead, and we could not speak to that. She asked if somebody could be alive in the snow without a jacket for many hours. And at that point, we were just trying to give her any hope that whomever A1 transported was still alive. And we kind of just talked about far off hypothermia cases where, kids have fallen in rivers and been submerged for many minutes, maybe even hours, and survived with no neurological deficits. So we were just trying to give her some sort of hope on the way to the hospital that there was a chance that her husband could be alive.
Now, at this point, what, if anything, did you know about sort of the relationship between your patient, the defendant, Ms. Reed, and the patient from ambulance 1 that had been transported previously?
She identified him as her husband
And is that something that she said once or more than once?
many, many times.
Now, she asked you some questions about his status and made specific reference to his clothes. Is that correct?
The only thing I recall is asking if he could have survived without a jacket.
Now, as far as these conversations that you had with Ms. Reed, where did they occur in relation to the ambulance?
They were in the back of the ambulance.
And who, if anyone, was present in the back of the ambulance beyond yourself and the defendant?
Jason Becker.
And with reference to, you mentioned that firefighter Becker was sort of the lead paramedic or the lead tech on this. Is that correct?
Yes.
So is there, from sort of his role and your role, what are some of the sort of differences in the duties and responsibilities in relation, we'll call it?
So for any Section 12, or our department policy is there will be 2 EMTs, paramedics, firefighters with during transport at all times. That's both for our safety and the patient safety. So that's why it wasn't just 2 EMTs or paramedics driving to the hospital. I was in back with Jason, and Sam Park was driving.
Now, as far as you testified earlier about observations of her being upset or distraught, is that correct?
Correct.
Was that consistent throughout your interaction with her, or?
No. There would be episodes where she would like go from crying in her hands to all of a sudden perking up. She was crying about having to take care of kids, saying she couldn't do it. And I was saying, you can do this. It's not as hard as it seems. She kept saying, I can't take care of these kids. They're not my kids and they're not his kids. That's when I figured out who Ambulance 1 transported. And I was saying, well, it seems like you have a good, strong support system. People who came and helped you in a blizzard to help come find your husband. She said, she asked me if I knew Kerry Roberts. I said I did. She said anybody who knows Kerry Roberts wouldn't say those things. And that kind of took me aback a bit. It seemed strange to say something like that after you were just crying because your husband was dead.
Take you back just within.
I was just kind of surprised.
If I could take you back within that just for a minute. So you had testified that during that, her description, you sort of realized who was the patient in Ambulance 1, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, made you realize, or who did you think it was?
I live in and grew up in the Ponquag neighborhood of Canton. And Mr. O'Keefe was known for taking on his niece and nephew after, I'm not sure positive of the relationship, but I believe it was his sister and his brother-in-law passed away. And it was something people admired him for, people looked up to him for. But I was able to, I moved into the Ponquag neighborhood back after living outside of Canton for a few years. The O'Keefes lived diagonally across from me. I never had any sort of interaction with him or anything. When I moved in, my wife was probably about 6 months pregnant and I had 2 toddlers, so I was pretty busy. I figured he was pretty busy. I never even had a chance to introduce myself or anything before he moved to Meadows, which is how I kind of figured out.
Your Honor, I object to this line of questioning.
Okay, next, sustain. Next question.
Now, you had also mentioned during your conversation with the defendant that she had said some things about Kerry Roberts, correct?
Correct.
And how is it that you know Kerry Roberts?
Well, Kerry lives around the corner from me.
Objection.
No, I'll allow that. Next question, please.
How long have you known Kerry Roberts?
Just from moving back into the neighborhood, she would run the neighborhood block party, and she put out that she would like the fire truck there on the neighborhood Facebook page. So I volunteered to bring the fire truck to the neighborhood block party.
And was Ms. Roberts on scene on Fairview when you arrived in your ambulance?
Yes,
So she was one of the other females along with the defendant.
correct.
Now, with reference to when you brought up as far as support system and included Ms. Roberts within that, what, if anything, did the defendant say about Ms. Roberts?
Objection.
Sustain. Next question, please.
Now, this conversation that you had with the defendants in the ambulance, about how long a period of time are we talking about?
20, 25 minutes.
And beyond what you've already testified to, what did sort of that conversation consist of, or what was the sort of tone and tenor of that conversation?
Again, we were just trying to give her any support. She was, once we were getting closer to the hospital, we
Objection.
So the tone and tenor. So what can you tell us about that? That's admissible, Mr. Yannetti. Go ahead.
the tone, she would go from being almost despondent to when she asked me if I knew Carrie Roberts, the only tone I can use to describe it is snarky.
Objection. Move to strike.
I'll strike that.
Now, you transported to a Good Samaritan, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you, during the transport, where are you in relation to Ms. Reed from Caribou to Good Samaritan?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
During the transport, Ms. Reed is where within the ambulance?
I believe we have what we call a tech bench, which is a long bench. There's the ambulance stretcher, and then to next to the ambulance stretcher is, we call it the CPR seat, and then that's where Miss Reed sat. And then I was in what we call the airway seat, which is basically like a captain's chair behind the stretcher.
And in addition to yourself and the defendant, who, if anyone else was sort of in the back of the ambulance at that time?
During transport?
Yes.
During transport, it was just me, Jason Becker, and Miss Reed.
So yourself along with firefighter Becker on the back, right?
Correct.
Who was driving the ambulance?
Sam Park.
Now, when you arrived at Good Samaritan, what, if anything, happened?
Miss Reed was asking to be able to see John, and I made the decision that I would run ahead to see if that was in the realm of possibility with the emergency room physician there. So I ran ahead. I came into they call it the code room at Good Sam, and I asked if the wife could see the husband. The ER doctor asked if she would be upset. I said if she would be upset if she was allowed to or not. And I said she's going to be upset. I believe she's going to be upset either way. He was asking if she would get in the way of the resuscitation efforts. And I said it's possible she's very upset.
And so once you arrive at the hospital with the patient, where do you go along with Ms. Reed?
We escorted her down to we call it the psych hall or the behavioral hall at Good Sam.
And about how long was it after you escorted her into the hospital that you stayed with her following that?
At least 10 minutes.
And during those 10 minutes, how would you describe sort of her behavior or demeanor during that time?
Objection.
No, he can testify to that.
He was giving the nurses a hard time about, I'm sorry, she was giving the nurses a hard time about having to get into a Johnny, about having to submit a urine sample. Even the AR techs went to the physician who was in the code room to see if she could not have to wear a Johnny, and the ER doc said no. If she's in the psych hall, she's a psych patient, needs to be in a Johnny. So at that point, there was just a nurse and a tech. We don't usually leave a psych patient with just a single nurse and a tech. So we decided to wait until security had gotten there before we left.
May I have one moment?
Yes.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Yannetti.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Whitley, when you showed up, you learned that Karen Reed was the patient that you were to deal with, correct?
Correct.
And it was your expectation that she would be going to the hospital, correct?
Correct.
One of the things that you do when you transport somebody to the hospital is you try to get a medical history, correct?
Yep.
Why is that important?
Generally, we get pertinent medical history to pass on to the hospital. So if something were to happen where the patient wasn't able to describe their past medical history, it gets passed on to the next caregiver, which would be the nurses, doctors at the hospital.
Okay. More information is always better than less information, correct?
I would say so.
And with regard to Ms. Reed, did you take a medical history from her?
I assume Jason did.
Okay. Did you learn the results of that medical history?
You'd have to refer to Jason's report.
I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Whitley, if I, I'm actually going to show you two documents with your permission. One would be Jason's report.
Okay.
And you talk about Jason Becker, correct?
Correct.
The other is a police report from Sergeant Yuri Buchnick. I'm going to give you the second page of that.
So let's do them one at a time.
Sure. And you've asked for Jason Becker's report, so I'll give you that first, okay?
Okay.
And when I approach you, I'm going to hand this to you, and I just ask you to look at it silently by yourself,
Okay.
and then look up at me when you're done.
Okay.
I'm going to collect that from you, if you don't mind.
The first report was the NFIRS report from my lieutenant.
Was Jason Becker's report included in it
Yes.
as well?
Yep.
Having reviewed those documents, does that refresh your memory as to the medical history that was taken?
Yes.
And what can you tell us about that?
Just lists multiple sclerosis.
What is multiple sclerosis?
I believe it's a neurodegenerative disease where the myelin sheathing of the trying to think of the word here, but
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
you know, I understand.
I'm sure you do. It's a disease.
It's a disease that's progressive and has neurological muscle control things involved with it,
And when you say progressive, that means it gets worse over time as you age.
as I understand it.
And that was the medical history you got from Karen Lee?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
All right. So, sir, you are all set. Thank you, Mr. Whitley. Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor, call Mr. Jason Becker to the stand.
Please watch your step. Sure. Face that clerk and raise your right hand.
solemnly swear the evidence you give in the court and jury in the case now hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
First name is Jason. Last name is Becker. Becker.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a firefighter paramedic, Canton Fire Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Fire Department?
5.5 years.
And prior to that, what, if any, other employment did you have sort of within that same field?
I worked at Found Ambulance and South Shore Hospital.
How long did you work at each of those respective positions?
Found Ambulance was about 5 years. South Shore Hospital, approximately 3 years.
And with regard to South Shore Hospital, what is it that you did there?
I was a nursing assistant in the emergency room.
And with regard to your work as a firefighter paramedic for the Canton Fire Department, you were a certified paramedic?
Yes,
And when did you first receive that certification?
October 2021.
And is that something that you receive, or when you receive that, is something that goes on in perpetuity, or is that something that you have a continuing educational component or recertification?
It's Con Ed education, every 2 years you have to recertify.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022 into January 29th, 2022. Were you working on that occasion?
I was.
And where were you assigned? I'm sorry. What type of shift were you working on that occasion?
What type of shift?
Yes, like what hour to what hour?
8 a.m. to 8 a.m., 24 hours.
So 8 a.m. on the 28th until 8 a.m. on the 29th.
Correct.
And where were you assigned on that day?
I was at Canton Station 2, Ambulance 2.
And who, if anyone else, was assigned with you to Ambulance 2 at Station 2 on that day?
Daniel Whitley, firefighter Daniel Whitley.
Now, at some point when you were working on the 29th, shortly after 6 a.m. or so, did you become aware of a call for station house number 1?
Yes.
And what, if anything, were you aware of as far as that earlier call?
As far as we know, there was a man down the road, initial, and I believe it was upgraded eventually to CPR in progress.
Now, at some point following that, approximately 6:41 a.m. or so, did you, your station, dispatch to Fairview Road?
Yes.
And in regard to?
A psych eval, possible section 12.
And in addition to yourself and firefighter Whitley in Ambulance 2, what, if any, other sort of vehicles were dispatched by your department to that call as well?
Canton Engine 3.
And if you know, who, if anyone, was on Canton Engine 3 at that time?
Lieutenant Greg Woodbury, firefighter Sam Park.
Now, with regard to the ambulance that you were in with firefighter Whitley, what were sort of, let me ask you this, between sort of call volume, what, if any, sort of policy or protocol is there as far as who does what on a particular call?
We switch off.
And so on this particular call that you were dispatched to Fairview Road, what were sort of each of your respective duties and responsibilities between yourself and firefighter Whitley?
Firefighter Whitley was the driver at that point, and it was my tech, is what it's called. So the next patient would be mine.
And so as sort of you were the lead tech on this, is that correct?
Correct.
And so as far as the lead tech's role, what, if any, duties or responsibilities do you have in regard to running a report?
It's my report. That'd be right.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
We have a document just asked you to review that with us.
The first report up here is the engines. second one would be mine.
You recognize the first few pages of that as the engine's report and the last few are yours, correct?
Correct.
And that's your report with relation to this dispatch and this call, correct?
Correct.
Can I approach the engineer?
Yes.
I want the seat to introduce in a minute, and
So both reports through this witness? Is there any objection?
Yeah, just take a look at the DA's copy. May we approach?
Okay.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, can I return the report to the witness?
Yes.
Testimony. Now, sir, when you first sort of arrive in the area of 34, when you arrive in the area of Fairview Road, what, if anything, is it that you first observe upon your arrival?
Coming down the street or on scene?
Yes, coming down the street.
Coming down the street, see the live police lights. You can see the fire engine, and I believe I said it's one black SUV.
And where is it that you and the ambulance sort of parked in reference to those other vehicles that you see?
I believe we parked. If the SUV was facing towards us, we parked to the left. I don't recall where the police cruiser was, though.
And when you first arrived there, who, if anyone, is it that you first speak with when you get there?
When we got out of the ambulance, I passed Officer Saraf and Officer Mulaney. They kind of briefed us, and then I walked over to the black SUV.
And when you walk over to the black SUV, who is it that you observe in that black SUV?
I saw two females.
And of those two females, do you see one of them in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
Right over there, the jacket on.
That's the record reflect identification of the defendant.
Okay.
Now, with respect to the defendant, Ms. Reed, where within the vehicle is she when you first come up to the vehicle on the field?
When I remember, she was in the front passenger seat.
And what, if any, knowledge did you have as far as the defendant, Ms. Reed, and her relationship to the earlier call that ambulance wanted to dispatch?
Very little. I think we had gotten briefed that she was the wife of the previous patient.
And was that something that she had stated or something that somebody else had stated? Where does that awareness come
I
from?
believe it was one of the Canton police officers that said it.
I'm sorry, what was that answer?
It was one of the Canton police officers.
Okay.
And so when you walk up to the car, what is it that you say to her? Or what, if any, conversation did you have with Ms. Reed at that?
So I went up to the window and introduced myself and just kind of asked her what was going on.
And how did she respond to that?
She was kind of, she was distraught. She was crying. She kind of told us that the statements she may have made, she didn't mean it because of the current events that she had just gone through.
What, if anything, did she say about that? If anything, did she say about what she had gone through?
She had just done CPR on her husband.
And so she referred to him as her husband as well.
Yes.
And this conversation that you had sort of at the side of the SUV, is that through the door, through the window?
From what I recall, it was through the window.
And at some point, does the conversation move to the ambulance?
Correct.
About how long was the conversation at the vehicle before the conversation shifted to the end?
5 to 10 minutes.
And as far as your dispatch for a psych or section 12, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury sort of that process, just in general terms first, as far as what does that process entail?
And when we get on scene
Yes,
for a section,
yes, please.
we go on scene, we kind of look at the environment, see what the environment's like, see if the patient's cooperative, uncooperative, what their demeanor is, if there's any obvious self-harm. If there's none, we kind of go up and talk to them, get a report, and ask them some basic triage questions.
And is that sort of the policy or the protocol or what you followed in this instance with Ms. Reed?
Correct.
Now, beyond what she had indicated to you initially, what, if anything, was she asking you during the course of your conversation with her once you were in the ambulance?
She kept asking if he was dead or could he be dead.
Is that something that she said once or more than once or something?
More than once.
And could you describe sort of the tone of her voice when she was saying?
It was pretty, it's kind of like it was a rapid kind of pressure speech. She was just a lot repetitive.
And as you were speaking with her, what, if any, observations did you make of her facial area?
She had blood on her face and her neck and her blood around her mouth, her neck and chin.
So with regard to sort of any earlier suicidal statements, what, if anything, did she say in relation to that?
She said she made him because she just went through a traumatic event, seeing her husband dead, and she had no plan on acting on it.
Now, pursuant to a Section 12 call, what, if anything, are you doing as far as documentation goes with respect to vital signs, things like that?
Well, it depends on the situation. In a situation of misreads, I took a regular just vital signs, pulse oximetry, see her heart rate. But for someone like a female psych patient, it's more verbal.
And as far as any of those sort of vital signs and things that you took, what, if anything, abnormal did you note in regard to that?
There was nothing too abnormal. Just the heart rate might have been a little bit high, but within normal range.
Could you please keep your voice up, sir? Thank you.
Sorry. With the vital signs, her heart rate was a little high. It was 98, but it was nothing concerning.
During the time that you're having this conversation with her in the back of the ambulance, how would you describe it?
She would have periods of calmness, and then other periods she would appear agitated because she didn't want to go to the hospital. But all in all, she was cooperative with us.
Now, at some point, she's cooperative, correct, and agrees to go?
Eventually, yes.
When you say eventually, was there some conversation related?
We kind of mentioned to her basically what a Section 12 is. And unfortunately, she'd have to come with us voluntarily or involuntarily.
So you're explaining the process to her, is that correct?
Correct.
Eventually, she agrees to go, correct?
Correct.
And as far as the transport goes, who, if anyone, is in the back of the ambulance with her during the transport period?
Me and Firefighter Whitley.
And who, if anyone, was driving the ambulance to the hospital?
Firefighter Park.
And which hospital did you transport Ms. Reed?
We went to the Good Samaritan Hospital.
Now, during the course of transfer to the hospital, what, if anything else, did Ms. Reed say with reference to children?
She was talking about Keith's children, and she was unsure, and she didn't know if she'd be able to take care of them. She was worried about that.
She was worried about that.
Yeah, she's worried about who would take care of the children if he was pronounced dead.
And And what, if anything, did she say about herself in reference to the children?
She didn't think that she could take care of him on her own.
Now, as far as this other person or the patient from the earlier call, how did she to that person in relationship to yourself?
She was calling him the husband.
Now, with reference to this particular, with reference to Ms. Reed in this conversation, what, if anything, did she say in regards to the last time that she had spoken to who she called her husband?
She had said that they had gotten into an argument. She was sad because that was the last thing she had said to him was the argument, but she didn't go into detail on what the argument was about or what was said.
Now, with regard to her speaking about the children, what, if any, further conversation did either yourself or firefighter Whitley have with her in regard to that?
With children?
Yes.
I don't recall.
The other female party that Ms. Reed was initially with in the vehicle when you first arrived, did you know who that was?
I don't know who she was.
And at any point in time, subsequent to that, did you learn who she was?
I did.
And who did you learn her to be?
She was Miss Carrie Roberts.
And with relation to your conversation with Ms. Reed on that day of January 29th, what, if anything, did she say about Ms. Roberts?
Objection.
Sustained.
The regard to the sort of medical questions that you were asked, from those medical questions, what, if any, questions would you typically ask someone with relation to consumption of alcohol or drugs?
Well, probably part of the second assessment, I asked if she had taken any drugs or alcohol, and she had denied it at that point.
She said that she had not, correct?
Correct.
The observations that you testified to earlier in regard to her, and by her I mean Ms. Reed's demeanor, did that change at all during the course of your interaction with her, or was that consistent throughout?
Demeanor as in,
It's a poorly phrased question. I'm going to try and rephrase it for you. So with regard to her demeanor throughout the course of your interaction with her, how would you describe that?
she was cooperative. Then she'd be calm, and then eventually she would kind of get a little agitated and repetitive questions. But she seemed distraught.
Now, with respect to the person she indicated was her husband, what, if any, questions did she ask either you or firefighter Whitley or both in relation to that?
She was asking if he was dead, or could he be dead, could be dead, and she said, could I have hit him?
Was that something that she asked once or more than once?
It wasn't a lot. It was more of, could he be dead, could he be dead?
So somewhat repetitive, is that correct?
Correct.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Firefighter Becker, just my own clarification. You had testified earlier that first arriving on scene and first spoke with Ms. Reed, she indicated that there was some statements that she said there were some statements that she did not mean, correct?
Correct. Suicidal statements.
And so, exactly. So my question is, that was in reference to the suicidal statements she had made prior to your arrival, correct?
Correct.
Not to any subsequent statements, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Rona. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You and I have met, right?
I believe so.
I wanted to go back to one piece of testimony that you offered on direct examination, if I may.
Sure.
You had, in response to a question from the prosecutor about the medical history and your question to Ms. Reed about whether she had had any alcohol to drink. I believe your answer today was she denied having drank alcohol the night before?
At the time that she was, she could have, I don't know if she drank alcohol the night before, but at that time I asked if she had any drugs or alcohol and she said no.
I'm sorry, if I just didn't hear.
Yeah,
the
you
answer.
need to keep your voice up, sir. Speak
Okay.
directly into
Sorry.
the microphone.
So I asked her if she had any drugs or alcohol and she said no.
Oh, if she had any drugs.
Well, she taken any drugs or alcohol. She said no.
Did you specify a time period?
I just assumed it'd be in the last few hours for the reason why we were there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Unsure if she had alcohol days prior, but for the reason why we were there.
Okay. So was it your understanding that the two of you had an understanding of what you were asking?
Sure.
Objection, move to
Yeah,
strike.
yeah. So the objection sustained. It's stricken. Ask the question differently, Ms. Giannetti.
Thank you, Ronna. All right. So I guess with regard to your intent and your state of mind when you were asking that question, you were asking, had you taken any drugs or alcohol within the last few hours? That's what you meant to ask?
Objection.
So the objection sustained.
What did you specifically ask?
So when I ask a patient if any drugs or alcohol, I'm talking about at that point in time, but an hour before, 2 hours before, not days before, weeks before.
Okay.
So-
And this was at 6:40 in the morning,
Correct.
correct? Did you smell any alcohol on her at that time?
I did not.
Okay. You would agree that she did tell you at some point that she had had alcohol the night before, correct?
No.
All right. So this is now, what's today, May 3rd of 2024?
Correct.
And this happened back in January, on January 29th of 2022?
Correct.
You were interviewed by a Trooper Michael Proctor on February 14th of 2022. Do you recall that?
I recall meeting with him, yes.
And February 14th of 2022 would have been a little bit more than 2 weeks after January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Your memory of what Karen Reed told you about whether she had anything to drink the night before would have been much better on February 14th of 2022 when you were talking to Trooper Michael Proctor than it would be today, correct?
Correct.
Because your memory doesn't get better over time, correct?
Certain circumstances, sure.
And with regard to whether Karen had indicated that she took any drugs, you told Trooper Proctor she said that she had not, correct?
Correct.
With regard to whether she had had alcohol the night before, you told Trooper Proctor on February 14th of 2022 that she did consume alcohol last night, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to see a sidebar on this. Please bring that with you, please.
you miss anything? Did you not hear?
With your permission, I'll repeat the question.
Sure.
You told Trooper Proctor on February 14th of 2022 that Karen had told you that she did consume alcohol the previous night, correct?
If that's in his notes,
Well, is your memory exhausted as to whether you told him that?
I don't recall.
If you saw his report with your statements in it, would that refresh your memory?
Sure.
It's a two-page report. I'll give you both, actually. It's a two-page report. I'll give you both pages, but I have highlighted a line on the second page, so I would direct you to that. May I approach?
Yes. And take your time reading it, sir.
Yes, yeah. And please read it silently to yourself and look up at me when you're done.
So I did say.
So, Mr. Becker, a couple of things. Wait for a question,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but also
Sorry.
you have to keep your voice up.
Okay.
I'm close to you and I'm having trouble hearing you. Most
Okay.
of the jurors are further away.
And the way this works is I have to collect that from you and then ask you a question, okay?
So
If I may approach you on.
Yes.
Having reviewed that document, does that refresh your memory as to whether or not Karen Reed, or strike that? Having reviewed that report, does that refresh your memory as to the fact that you?
Does that refresh your memory?
Does that refresh your memory?
it does.
Okay. And so did you tell Trooper Proctor on February 14th that Karen Reed had told you on January 29th that she had consumed alcohol the night before that?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that when you were listening to her talk at times, that her speech was very rapid?
Correct.
And particularly when she had said the words, you know, is he dead? Is he dead? She would repeat it repetitively, correct?
Correct.
And she was fixated on that, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to the last interaction that she spoke about with whom you thought she said her husband, she didn't give you any detail about that, correct?
She did not.
You don't know whether it was an in-person communication?
That wasn't my position to ask more details about that.
And I'm not criticizing you, sir. I'm just trying to get to what your knowledge was in terms of the
Right.
information you got from her. So she didn't specify that it was an in-person communication, correct?
No,
She didn't specify as to whether it was a phone conversation?
she did not.
She didn't specify whether it was a text message exchange back and forth?
She did not.
And she didn't specify whether it was an angry voicemail that she left, correct?
She did not.
No further questions. Thank you.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
Sorry. I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. All right, Mr. Becker, or Firefighter Becker, you are all set, sir. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. Yes, you can leave that right where it is. Thank you, sir. Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
May we approach?
Sure. Does it make sense that rather than starting with another witness, figure it's a Friday afternoon, it's been a long week for you all, we'll excuse you at this point. So please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, disregard it and let us know. And have a great weekend. Monday will be a full day. We'll see you first thing Monday night.
Please rise for the jury. You guys ready to swear?
May be seated.
I think there's an exhibit in the witness stand. All right, because I've decided that it makes more sense to do exhibits the old-fashioned way because it's simply not working out. And there are additional that are in the 300s and 200s. So what I would like to do is take all of these, and I know Madam Court Reporter has been great about sticking around all late during the week to pre-mark things. This is more important to me that we get the record straight from this point. I would prefer the jurors to have the exhibits in order and not have numbers 200 and 300 in where they should be 15 and 16. So what I would like you to all do is take a look at the exhibits that have actually been introduced. Their prior numbers, if you have referred to them by their prior numbers, I will permit you for the rest of the trial to say previously referred to as 308, but now exhibit 15 until you feel you don't need to do that anymore. So it means things are going to have to be renumbered. So, Madam Court Reporter, was there anything else we needed to discuss on this? Is there anything else you need from the lawyers? Okay. So, I don't want to use your name. You've got a list of everything, and Mr. McDermott's got a list of everything that's been introduced. Do you need me to do this, or is this something you can all do with Madam Court Reporter? And I want to come out and make sure it's right. All right, so why don't you all take 10 minutes to see if you can work this through. I'll come out at the end of 10 minutes, see what you have, and we'll make sure the record's straight. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does. The only thing that I would ask to add to that, Your Honor, is in conformity with the court's ruling as far as redaction to the run sheets and the run reports. I'm not sure if they've been stickered or not, but there are medical records with regard to both the victim and the defendant that would be in there, and I would ask for them to either be marked for identification or taken out at this point. Okay. Ms. McLaughlin indicates they haven't been marked yet, so I would just ask to sort of retrieve.
All right, so that's sort of the second point. I assume there are many, many, many pages of medical records, and one of the things I told you this morning is if records are going to be introduced subject to redactions, those redactions have to be done before they're introduced. It's going to take some time, so you have to be, if you're not in agreement, then you need to tell me what you're not in agreement over, and I'll have to decide it, but they need to be redacted beforehand. Just because this is a long trial, I don't want it to take any longer than it necessarily has to be. And we have to make sure all of the exhibits are in order, especially if they do end up numbering in the hundreds. So, all right, so you've factored that into your schedule. We've got many days that we won't be in session. It seems like a good use of council's time to redact records and talk. If you need additional time and we need to cut into the evidence, I'd prefer not to, but I need to know. All right. So I have received from the Commonwealth all of the videos that I requested. I received a flash drive today. When can I get the videos? I thought I was clear yesterday. Apparently I wasn't. So when can I get all of the videos that the defendants intend to introduce? I had hoped to look at them over the weekend.
We can do, it's not a matter of getting them onto a flash drive. That's quick. It's just a matter of getting them to the court. So I would invite the court to direct us how, if you want to use the weekend, let us know. We work on Saturdays and Sundays.
So you can't do it today? You can't do it before you leave? I don't think your IT person's here, right?
I might
Oh,
be able to.
if you can do it before you leave, if he can just download it onto a flash drive, that would be great. Do you want to go talk to him and see how long?
You might be able to do that.
We may be able to do that.
Why don't you talk to him?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
We won't leave until we give it to you.
That would be great. And Ms. Gianetti, yesterday you did say that you'd also give me some idea on why you think they're coming in.
Sure.
Okay, so if you have that, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to make sure I'm very clear about what the court would like. We provided the double videos, the ones that we had put the good and Sirach cameras together. The court wants every single video that we intend to produce
Yes.
for the rest of trial.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
All right. And that's what I requested from both of you. I received, Ms. Gilman, tell me if I'm wrong, but Mr. McDermott handed me a flash drive today that said this was all the Commonwealth's video exhibits. Yes.
And that was after we met this morning, correct? Yes. Okay.
All right. So that'd be great. I just, I want to know what's on them. I was surprised yesterday and I
Understood.
shouldn't be surprised.
Understood.
All right. So I'll come out after you remark the exhibits. Do you need a break before then, Madam Court Reporter? Ms. McDermott? All right. Thanks.
Court, all rise, please.